Thanks, Christian, and thanks to everybody who's coming to the session. This is the very first time that I'm sharing this, so forgive me if I'm a bit nervous. But what I'm going to talk about today is it's an activity that I've been doing for a while. This is the kind of journey that I go on with my students every year. And I'm just going to share the details about it a little bit. I'm from the University of Glasgow in the School of Psychology and Neuroscience, and this is something I developed to help my students engage in a variety of different skills development that I value. So just very briefly, what I'm going to talk about, just rationale and what I teach, the details of the activity that we have and the assessment associated with it. We also include a student reflection, so just talk a little bit about that. And then hopefully end with some challenges and opportunities. Because it's an active learning session, I have for you a little Padlet where you can add ideas. I've just put some questions and thoughts and provocations in there that you can maybe think about as we go. But okay, so just a little bit about the course and the rationale for what we've been doing. So I've got, at the moment, this is in an online distance learning course. I've also done it in face-to-face courses, and I'm going to do that again next year. And I've also done it in, in a blended approach as well. So there's quite a different number of places where I've used this activity. At the moment, this year and last year and the year before, there were about 100 students. This is part of a core course on our BPS accredited program. So there are requirements that we teach students certain things, but it's not that strict, but you do have to cover the curriculum that's appropriate for the BPS. And the online course is about 20 weeks. When I've presented face-to-face, it's a 10-week course or 12-week course, really. So it's not the whole year, it's part of the year. The course aims to cover everything needed for the BPS accredited component of social psychology. And there are challenges in the field in which I teach, which is about generalizability and applicability of the materials that we teach. So this activity gives me an opportunity to really get students to think about some of the challenges that we face in our field, which is why I like it, and one of the reasons I developed it. So kind of the rationales, what we want to build. We want to build skills in critical evaluation with students. We want to give them experience of collaboration, so working together with other people, co-creation as well. And for me, it's very important to have opportunities for students to choose things that they want to they want in their assessment. You'll see that the choices aren't infinite here. There are some limitations, but generally, I'm interested in how students choose. What opportunities we can give them to choose what they can do in their assessments. The other thing that I think is very important is to give students a voice, especially those who are normally quiet in academic settings. This has been an issue that we've had for a long time here at Glasgow, but not necessarily my online distance learning course, but certainly face-to-face courses. We often have students who come from poorer backgrounds, the first people to have in their family to come to university and things like that. And so they don't often find a classroom situation or a discussion situation the most comfortable. And so I want to give them practice in raising their voices in those kinds of situations. And of course, the classroom can be in various ways. It can be an online class or it can be an in-person class. But the thing is, I had noticed for the longest time that a lot of students are quiet. And I want to give them opportunities to not be quiet, to add their voice to things. And then the other thing that I think is very important is for students to be part of the knowledge creation process, so that I'm not just a transmitter of information, but that students get to take part in that as well. Okay, so just a little bit of notes about participations. I put already in the chat, and I'll just do it again, the Padlet. So feel free to add some thoughts on there as you go along, but these are the kinds of things that maybe you can keep in mind as we go. So how might you use this activity yourself? What skills could you build with it? That's different from the ones that I have, or the same ones that I like to build. What challenges would your students encounter in doing this kind of thing? And would this work in your class, with your class size, your subject, your assessment? Can you build this in? Okay, so okay, so what the activity actually is, and there's various, it's quite complex, so there's various components, but the first component is a series of asynchronous debates. This is where we get students to build the class knowledge base beyond the set materials or lectures that I have. The reason I became interested in this was because for this particular course was because when at the end of the year, when I would get students essay assessments, for instance, or their critical literature reviews or whatever I try to call them, I would see these wonderful examples of a knowledge creation where people had taken knowledge, made something new out of it, and the only person that they shared that with was myself. I saw examples of people taking my subject and turning it around and making it be about them, about applying it in their own context and things like that. So those are always things that I had asked students to do. But of course, it was only written for the teacher or only written for me. And this is something that bothered me because everybody, lots of other people would actually, benefit from that. So I wanted to make something that would help them to do that. It's a scaffolded activity. So we set in some minimum expectations like word counts, and we set some questions, because we do have to cover the learning objectives for the course. And so I also, so I do specify, make those kinds of things, but they're broad questions. They're much more about the themes that we're trying to develop rather than specific knowledge. Then students can choose which aspects of the course they want to further add to or further explore. They can also choose how they're going to put themselves into it. So for instance, say there is something about obedience, but somebody comes from a very different culture where obedience is enacted in a different way, then this gives them the opportunity to talk about their own context and their culture, associated with the material that they're being presented, which often comes from a very Western European centric perspective. The other thing is it's asynchronous. So students have flexibility over when they want to engage and also over how much they want to engage. So there's some minimal expectations which they have to fulfill for an assessment that we set afterwards, but they can choose how much or how little they want to engage beyond that. So just thinking a little bit about the assessment, because it does, unfortunately for my context, I have to assess it. But from the post, students can then, from all their posts that they put on these debates, they can choose the items for their portfolio. They need to put in one position statement. This is where they make a response to the set questions, and 2 replies. The other expectation is that because we have to cover all the learning objectives in the course, they need to engage in at least 3 different debate questions. So they need to engage in 3 different places. And some other expectations are that ideas must be evidence-based and include critical evaluation, which I scaffold them along the way, just kind of what kind of critical evaluation we're looking for. And I also asked them to add a reflection at the end to say things like how the course and the debates have informed them and what changes they have made associated with their teaching and this. So just a little bit about the posts themselves, the kinds of scaffolding we do there. For posts, we scaffold things that are important for us. So for position statements, we say things like you need to clearly state your position and justify it. This is not something that students, it surprised me, but this is not something that students are often asked to do. Put a statement clearly and give some evidence for it. They often do that, but it's something that as I did this, I discovered is something that's actually implicit in what we often ask them. So I make that clear. I make this is an opportunity for you to state your opinion, and then you need to give evidence towards that. It is they only get 700 words. The original configuration that I had it in was 500 words, but the students did tell me that that was too few. I think 700 are too many. But they feel more comfortable doing that. So that part of it is kind of like, through time, we've figured out how many words they feel that they can do right. They can, how many words they feel that they need in order to share their knowledge. But they do need to be writing concisely, and they need to be picky of the ideas that they present. So in 700 words, they can maybe present 2 ideas and fully explore those and evidence them. It needs to be evidence-based, so they need to give details of the research papers that they look at and things like that. And it is to be written for your peers, so they need to write for peers. And so there's an assumption of knowledge that comes with that. They can assume that the people that they're writing for have knowledge of the taught component. So they can start from that perspective. And then the point is that they add new knowledge in. And so typically the best kinds of posts are ones where students try to draw different themes from different parts of the course together. Those work very well, or where they introduce maybe a new paper that they have that they want to talk about, and respond to that in terms of the knowledge that they've already gained. And the final thing is that I ask them to choose something that they care about, something that has meaning for them. Because again, once they care about it, they seem to put more effort into it. But that's also the thing that other students seem to tap into. In terms of the replies, pretty much the same kinds of thing that they need to do for the position statements, but we add things like they need to be collegiate. So the aim is to add knowledge, not to disparage a peer or to prove somebody wrong or anything like that. The thing is that kind of like take as a given the knowledge that there is. What can we add more? They need to actually answer their peer. It's not about them doing something just for themselves. It's actually something that needs to add to the debates. And the other thing we tell them in terms of the assessment is that the replies are often very good for filling in gaps in the learning objectives. So they get 3 different opportunities to show their breadth of being able to cover the learning objectives of the course. And I think this is something that seems to resonate with them and with students, and they feel that is a good thing. There's some key ideas that we always try and build into the debates, which is that it's a transparent debate. You see each other's posts, and that's the bottom line. Is everybody's in this conversation. There are opportunities to repost, but it's a kind of like, be polite, be caring of your peers, because if you repost, they have to read that again. And now if you have 100 people and you're having to read 3 posts by 100 people, that's like 300 posts that you need to read. So keep it to minimal. And the other thing is add something of value. So tell people why you have changed it. What is it in your thinking that has changed? And we give them the opportunity to do that without it counting towards the word count in their final assessment. And then it needs to be really referenced and polished. So it needs to be polished pieces at the end of it. And posts in the assessment must, that they actually add into the assessment, need to be the same as the ones that are online. They can correct spelling, they can change small things, so if, for instance, in their, from a formative activity, I give them feedback that, maybe there's paragraph structure is not very good. They can go fix their paragraph structure, but that would be the thing that would change. They can't add new ideas and things like that. It needs to be, so their assessment is linked very closely to the debating activity. We provide a fair range of support. So we give directed learning activities, so post-class opportunities to practice writing, and then they can post that on Microsoft Teams or in other forums. Students, we really try and engage in the Microsoft Teams forums. But we are very hands off the actual debates. The debates are the student space. So staff wouldn't really be involved in that a lot. But we are involved in other places, so there's other forum spaces where we interact with students about their ideas, and we give them lots of feedback and things like that. But really the debates are their domain. We also give them the opportunity for a formative submission. with individual and class feedback. So typically we find that in a class of about 100, about 40 students are organized enough that they will give something about, halfway through the course, and they will post on the debates and submit it for formative feedback. And then from that, we kind of like get a sense of what the whole cohort's skill level is, and we can give the whole class feedback about that, giving, really, and there's the other benefit of it, that because there are concrete examples that we can show that the students have access to, we can give real clear ideas in the class feedback about specific things and related to specific posts if needed. We tend to make positive feedback rather than saying somebody has done something wrong. And then, of course, there's student hours and any other ways that students want to approach us. In terms of the reflections, this is just an example. This is to tell you what we do there. But students are asked to add a short formative statement reflecting on how your understanding of, basically you can read those things there, how your understanding of social psychology has evolved through the debates, or how you developed your critical evaluation and writing skills through the course, maybe evidencing something like the feedback that we've given either to the class or as an individual. It's not assessed, but it's a very important part of engaging with the feedback and with the course is this reflection. And this is where students can also voice the kinds of benefits there were. Then in their feedback for their assessment, I always ask them to revisit their reflection to start with, to see just where, what kinds of things they found there. Okay, so some of the benefits of this, and okay, got a little bit of time left. So there are some benefits for the students. Themes that come back in the feedback time and time again are this idea of development of critical evaluation skills. Students are really able to point to this. For these students, it's the first time that they actually have ideas of where they can point to it, which I think they're not new learners, they're experienced learners. So this is really great to see them actually be able to kind of like come full circle and say, okay, yes, this is where I can see that I've done that. Seeing peer writing, there's two benefits to this. One is this experience of seeing diversity at first hand. Something that comes time and time again is how students say how interesting it was, how many different ways people could interpret the questions, and also how they learned about many different kinds of groups and how people do that. But the other thing that is really of benefit is seeing a peer's writing so that you can critique it, so it's at the same level as you. Very often we share examples with students of very polished writing and very polished ideas. Well, a lot of the students share very polished idea and very polished writing, but more at the level that's with their peers. And so seeing the development of writing as well. So very early on in the debates, things are not always that smooth. As they progress, they get better and better at writing as well. There are some barriers. I didn't expect this, which was a real surprise to me, but it seems to be that it's much more intimidating to write for your peers than it is to write for a teacher. And students sometimes procrastinate before they write for this reason. And imposter phenomena are something that comes out again. Students feel that their voice isn't strong enough. They don't have enough to say. They don't feel that they can have opinions and ideas. And a couple of the challenges that we have faced is, one is timing. So most students engage at the last minute, they don't engage in it throughout. And so in the last couple of weeks before the assessment is due, you see a lot of activity on the debates. But now those early engagers, they get very frustrated because they're like, people aren't answering, there's not enough for me to do. I engaged, I did my part of it. Other people are not doing their part of it. I'm trying to find ways around this, but that is one of the challenges that we face. Imposter phenomena, the idea that people procrastinate until close to the deadlines because they don't know what they're going to say, they're worried about it and things like that. That is something real, and I try to work with students about that. We we have a lesson about imposter phenomena and that kind, because that builds into social psychology as well. So it's useful to have that and to talk to them a little bit about that. And that seems to have helped to mitigate this a little bit. I'm sorry, doing that. In terms of upscaling and transfer, the smallest class I've done this was about 50 students. We did an ethics debate. The largest class was about 300 students. That was an online class during the pandemic. And how do we help students? So the main question or the challenge there is, how do we help students to read the work of 300 other people? How do you help them to make their way through all of that? There's a variety of things that I've tried, some more successful than others, but typically I think about a group of 100 students in a group, they can read that amount of stuff. Where else have we tried this? We've used it in an ethics debate, in social debates, which is what I'm talking about here. And I've just some questions for you about where you can use it. And then just the take-home messages before we get to a few questions or a few bit of contributions from people. The debates offer an authentic assessment of that I think develops skills and skills that we value. It has a co-creation opportunity, so students build their class knowledge base themselves. It has a chance to help students to develop their writing. That is a big thing that we do in this, is help students develop their writing and their written voice. And it can be applied to many settings, I think, anywhere where it's possible to critically evaluate and build a class knowledge base. So thanks very much, and I'm ready for questions if anybody has anything. I'll just put the Padlet there again in case anybody wants to engage with that. So, okay, thanks.
Thanks very much, Helena. Really enjoyed that. Anything that involves sort of working with peers, I think such an underused resource sometimes. Just having that sort of social constructivism of knowledge is fantastic, and just that multiplier effect, I think, of having lots of different perspectives rather than just that sort of one-to-one teacher's perspective on a topic, I think is really valuable. And of course, with the reflection, you've got that metacognition coming in as well, which I think is another thing that perhaps is a bit underused in terms of getting students to think about their learning. So some really, really strong themes coming through there. Any questions? I can see the chat starting to pick up. No, that's you with your Padlet link. So I think a couple of things have come in on the Padlet.
Yeah, I can maybe share the Padlet screen.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So I don't know, are there any questions that you want to pick up on? Particularly, I think the first one was around encouraging participation and making sure that the students get involved. I don't know whether thanks to the assignment.
Yeah, so I think confidence and self-worth. Yes, I think the kinds of confidence and self-worth, those are the skills that people do come out with. I mean, it's wonderful to see their reflections at the end. And that's kind of part of why I include that. It's just to get that sort of little teacher pat on the head saying, oh, I've developed critical evaluation. These have been really worthwhile and things like that. But I think it's that kind of like, just helping students to build some soft skills that they don't normally have. The one thing I can say is 1 year I didn't include the assessment part, and students didn't take part in it. And that was very sad. I was quite disappointed with that. But this is something that it takes quite a bit of investment by a student to go and research something and to add it to a forum and things like that, especially the number of words that are required here. And the expectations that we have that it's a proper piece of writing. So when students don't have that kind of like incentive of there's going to be a grade at the end of it, it has been difficult to engage them in that. So I try to think of other ways. So the directed learning activities that we have kind of like feed into that as well. And we try and do that. But again, try and link those activities to the debate questions so the students know that there's something valuable in doing those. They're going to get some kind of feedback about the ideas that they have and stuff like that before they actually engage in the debates or have to be assessed on it. So,
okay. I can see Beth has a question around the level. That is this master's level, and do you think it would work with lower levels?
So I have used it in undergraduate. So the master's level that we have is actually a conversion course. So that means that it's students who haven't studied psychology before. So they're new to psychology. Some of them, you know, come from various different backgrounds. The only requirement is that they have studied something before. But a lot of them are not scientists, and we require they kind of like use science-based language and engage in materials that are scientific in nature and things like that. So in many ways, this is quite new for them, but I have used it with undergraduate students as well. I wouldn't use it in level 1 or level 2 necessarily, but I have used it for honours level. So in Scotland, our degrees are 4-year degrees. So the first 2 years are pre-honours, and then honours years are level 3 and 4. So I've used it at honours level for level 3 and 4 students. And that's what I'm going to do this year again. I would say the difference between masters and honours level students is that the master's students, because they come from so much of a greater variety of backgrounds, the debates had a lot more scope in them. So they do introduce a lot more different diversity. Whereas, the undergraduate students, they brought really excellent writing skills, you know, so they were really some fantastic writing in there. And I think that's the other thing that students talk about, is that this really helps them with their concise writing, which is something we all value. And I think it's something that's valued in the workplace afterwards as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, I wonder if we have the Padlet there, Helena, if there's anything else that you could perhaps respond to on the Padlet if you haven't had an opportunity already.
Okay, so there's the one about masters.
I was wondering if you can perhaps respond in writing on the Padlet. I know I asked I resisted the temptation to put my question to the top, but just around sort of coverage. So I'd be really interested to sort of see how, if you encountered any issues with, you know, some students not getting as much of a response as others, and how you sort of handle that. So I think that would be really good to follow up with. But as I say, we'd better transition over to the second presentation today. But if you could either with a mime or a reaction, show your appreciation for Helena for the first presentation of this session. Thanks very much.